What brings you out here on a Saturday evening at Occupy San Francisco when so many other people are out at the bar trying to get laid?
All right, Joe. We're out here tonight. Well, I'm out here tonight because I'm tired of this war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I don't think we need over 700 foreign military bases. I think it's a waste of our tax dollars, and people are fighting over, let's make a cut here or raise taxes there, but really the question we should be asking is, why don't we just bring our troops home, and how much money will that save? And then we won't need to argue about health care and schools. But other people are here for various reasons, whether it's because they don't have jobs. We're protesting in front of the Federal Reserve building of San Francisco because the Federal Reserve is illegal and unconstitutional, and it was run through Congress during their Christmas break in, I believe, 1913, and then shortly after that we started the federal income tax, which is it's questionable whether it's constitutional or not, but there's never been a case on it. And now I think my friend Adam can tell you more about the Federal Reserve.
Well, just briefly, before I go, I wondered if you could accomplish one single thing by being out here in front of the Federal Reserve. What would you like to accomplish?
I think raising awareness about the Federal Reserve, because most people don't realize that even though it's called the Federal Reserve, it's not federal. It's private bankers that own all the money in the United States, and all the money that's in our pockets and in our bank accounts is owed back to them with interest. And it's really, cartel is the right word to describe this group of private bankers that run the Federal Reserve, and they're the ones that have been funding both sides of every major war for the last 200 years.
Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
I just want to say, and on top of what he's saying, yeah, we're in an information war, so anything we can do to spread these ideas, spread the ideas of ending the Fed, spread the ideas of really true liberty in a sense that we can end sort of the corporatist control over essentially what's a cartelized banking system. The banksters are getting all their money from the Fed to basically wreak havoc, and we need to basically have people understand that really the true source is right here, the Fed building. One half of our transactions are controlled by a monetary system that is, that they can artificially manipulate interest rates and print money. And just recently we found out that they they gave out $16 trillion to international banks, to certain corporations, to all the big banks here. What happened there? And we got to find out more what's going on, because if you print enough money, you cause prices to rise while our wages just remain stagnant. And sooner or later, people on a fixed income are going to be really hurt. The poor and the middle class are getting wiped out by inflation, and people need to recognize and understand our monetary system. People need to understand the Austrian theory of the business cycle, which creates malinvestments in the economy, which creates cheap credit and fuels money and creates the bubbles, creates the booms and busts in the economy. That happens because of our Federal Reserve monetary policy. So,
do you think it is pure coincidence that while thousands of people are protesting in New York, they're on Wall Street and they're calling for an end to capitalism?
Right.
And they are striking out at Wall Street. Do you think it is just coincidence that on the West Coast in San Francisco, we've chosen to occupy the Federal Reserve? Do you think that the youth here this morning, late tonight, do you think that they understand the role that the Federal Reserve plays in their suffering, or do they just come here because this is where Occupy has settled down?
Interesting. I haven't probably spoken to enough people here to be able to say what brought everyone here, to this very spot. It's good that they're out here, though. I mean, it's good that they're outside the Federal Reserve building. Hopefully that definitely draws attention to it. That's the biggest thing I can hope for. I have a good feeling about a number of people out here that I have. The people who I've talked to, it's definitely made me a good feeling that people are starting to wake up to it, whether they're, there enough, or they understand the full, situation of. But they have the passion, definitely, and I definitely support that.
Amen.
Can I jump on this one, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
I notice a lot of people are quick to jump on bashing capitalism and saying our current capitalist system's failing, but if you go talk to a communist and you're like, well, why did communists fail? They're like, well, there's never been a true communist system. Well, likewise, we don't have capitalism here. What we have is corporatism, which is really, we're getting close to fascism. And yeah, corporate fascism is failing us, and we should be doing something about it, but we don't need to be so quick to call it capitalism, just like any socialist wouldn't say that what existed in Russia was socialism.
Would you say that all rich people are capitalists?
No. I'm a capitalist.
But what's the term? How are you using the term? But how are you using the term capitalism?
Well, I'm using it how Michael Moore has used it.
Okay.
As he stands in front of the protesters in New York, when people ask him his thoughts on the Federal Reserve, he says it's not the Federal Reserve. He says it's capitalism and capitalism.
Here's the distinction. J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs versus someone like Steve Jobs,
That's
Rest
a good
in
one,
peace.
because
Like,
in real capitalism, people volunteer to buy your product and pay money. But what we have going on right now is like, they take our money against our will. For instance, I'm forced to pay taxes, and then my taxes go to subsidize oil companies, and I don't even drive a car, so other people who drive cars can get cheaper gas at the pump, when I'm trying to make a statement that I don't want to drive a car because I think that's I don't want to burn the oil, but I'm really just subsidizing their bad habits and I have no say over it. I would never volunteer to do that.
If you could accomplish one thing, one single thing, by your time and your sacrifice, what would you like to accomplish by being here at Occupy San Francisco in front of the Federal Reserve?
I really hope we end the biggest thing, my biggest issue besides, definitely ending the Fed, but the thing is actually really my number one issue is ending the wars. Straight up, because war is the health of the state, and in the military-industrial complex has probably been the longest surviving and largest sort of example of corporatism, in America. The billions, the trillions that we spent subsidizing certain businesses for the sake of building hundreds of thousands of missiles that we're never going to need, because what we really need to do is defend just our country, provide for the common defense. But do we need to have 130 bases? Do we need to be having our soldiers killed, let alone all the innocent Iraqis, the Afghans, and Pakistanis who probably would believe in the ideals of America. Really, there's plenty of people out there who just want prosperity, and they don't want bombs. They don't want civil wars in their countries, and we are contributing to that. That's the biggest thing.
Is there any presidential candidate other than Ron Paul who you think cares about peace for the United States of America?
Nope. Yeah.
What about you?
I've seen Dennis Kucinich saying stuff about bringing troops home, and I think he's a good Democrat. But
what are your thoughts when people say that Ron Paul has actually spoken out about putting Dennis Kucinich on his cabinet?
I think that's great. I like Dennis. I think he's a good guy.
Dennis, I would have to agree. I was thinking of presidential candidates. Nobody, the presidential candidate, has been talking consistently, is the key word, consistently and principally against the war, and really against, just really so heavily against militarism, out there, because it's not defense, it's aggressive militarism that we need to worry about. And Dennis Kucinich has definitely he's great. Yeah, he's definitely been more outspoken, and he's been a good ally in the Congress for Ron Paul. That's the great thing about Ron Paul, is he has reached out. People say, well, can he enact bipartisanship? Well, he's clearly shown it. He has reached out to a lot of people on all sides of the aisle. But I do want to add, I think it is right to be angry at Wall Street, because there were plenty of people, at least, especially in the bigger banks, Goldman Sachs, who work directly hand in hand with the government to, well, literally, I mean, you have Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner was a former Goldman Sachs employee, and now he's working as the Treasury Secretary. So it really is the tension between how the fusion of big business and government, which is essentially fascism and corporatism, how that is rooted in the system.
You know what else is weird about that bailout, and people like the other side, like spectrum of voters will be calling themselves conservative capitalists or Tea Partiers, and they're like, this is socialism, it's socialism, but it's really not, because the people getting the subsidies and the bailouts are the biggest, richest people in the country, and it's not the people, it's the biggest, richest corporations and entities that are getting the bailouts, and that's again sounding more fascist, where corporations serve the government and government serves corporations, and the people get fleeced.
Let me conclude this interview by thanking both of you for taking your time to come out here on behalf of America and letting your voices be heard. Where do you suggest that Americans and people around the world get their news from when they cannot trust MSNBC and Fox News and CNN? Is there anywhere that people can get information from somebody who believes what they're telling you?
I go to Media Roots on Facebook, but I don't know if you don't have access to that. Then I don't even have a TV.
Right on. And what about you?
There's a couple places. To learn more about the economic side of this, sort of the economic theories that behind our sort of corporatist system, and learning more about that would be Mises.org. That's where I sort of woke up, and I read just a lot. I would read countless articles, and what's really cool is they provide all of their content for free, because the people at the Mises Institute believe in the power of free ideas, and believe that ideas are non-scarce, by the way, so they don't believe, they believe in putting all their information online for people to read it. So that's a good resource, because they have just countless audio files, videos, and articles. Because the biggest thing to learn, I would say, for someone who really wants to learn more about the Fed, is to learn not just about the Fed, but the Austrian theory of the business cycle. Really explains our booms and busts in the economy, and how that benefits certain players in the economy, certain people at the top, unfortunately, where it helps people at the top and hurts the people who are on fixed incomes. Because what happens is, a short synopsis of the Austrian business theory is that the Federal Reserve artificially lowers interest rates, creates all this cheap money that gets poured out to the banks. The banks then basically loan it out, creates a speculative bubble. That money has to basically go somewhere. So in this case, the last speculative bubble was in housing. All this money and all this sort of all this credit just went through there, and so it ratcheted up housing. And when all that money dried up, the housing crisis, happened. The prices crashed, and a lot of people got left holding, nothing. So.
Any closing words for info warriors around the world?
It's time to end the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Bring the troops home.
Bring the troops home.
Thank you, guys.
Number one.
Thank you for your time and your sacrifice.